Chapter 18. The mingling smell of blood and alcohol was thick in the air inside VIP room number 888 at the Paradise. The unpleasant odor was stifling. "Hold it." Just as Samuel's lackeys armed themselves with anything they could find in the room, wine bottles, stools, even a fruit knife, to fight Emmanuel, Samuel called out, halting his men. His subordinates turned to stare at him, confused by his command. Samuel ignored them and instead stared intently at Emmanuel. He could tell from Emmanuel's gaze that the young man was ready to fight anyone who was in his way to the death. The head of the underground circles was not born in one day. Samuel had fought his way to the top and once possessed the same gaze as Emmanuel. He knew it signaled a man who would not even flinch at the prospect of death. Anyone foolish enough to confront such a man would suffer a painful end. Samuel could not help but ask, "Brat, who exactly sent you here?" He only occupied the project grounds by force because he knew the extent of the company's power. In the past, Terrence Group and Cloud Construction had sent men to oust them to no avail. The companies dared not turn the issue into a big deal for fear of Samuel's retaliation. He never imagined someone from Terrence Group would dare confront him today, and one who had actual fighting skills to boot. Instead of replying to Samuel's question, Emmanuel said, "That's none of your business. I've said my piece. If you refuse to call off your men from the project grounds, I will fight you to the bitter end." He sounded so calm it was positively chilling. Everyone in the room stared at him, agape with shock. They had never known anyone to taunt Samuel brazenly without any backup. Elena gazed at Emmanuel with bright eyes. "He's the most gallant man I've ever seen." Suddenly, Samuel burst into a guffaw. His laughter lasted a good while before his gaze cooled. He replied sneeringly, "What a surprise. To think someone in Yeringham would dare to use such a tone against me. But young fella, you're overestimating your skills. You should know that once I give the word, your corpse will be floating along Yeringham River tomorrow." The threat struck fear within Sheldon, whose legs almost crumpled from fear. He sucked in several breaths to calm himself down. Samuel hardly joked around, and he would surely make good on his promise. "I don't know about that," Emmanuel continued firmly, "but I do know I have a goal to complete today. Even if I end up dead, I'll drag all of you down to hell with me." He meant every word he had said. This was no empty boast on Emmanuel's part. He was out of options, in any case. He needed to bring Mackenzie home to meet his mother. If he failed today, his proud wife would turn her nose up at him, and it would be near impossible to convince her to visit his family home in the future. Samuel and Emmanuel found themselves engaged in a tense staring contest. The older man had spent most of his life fighting and knew he could not afford to piss off Emmanuel. Were he any younger, he would have considered a duel with Emmanuel. Things were different now. Samuel was older and had too much to lose. Gone was the hot-blooded fervor and all or nothing attitude that so defined his past. To put it plainly, if he ended up behind bars for breaking the law, his age and physicality no longer aided him in earning the reverence and admiration of his fellow inmates. Spying his hesitation, Emmanuel advised earnestly, "Mr. Weber, it's time to stay on the right side of the law. Please call your men back." It was at that point that Sheldon realized he was no longer quaking in fear. Emmanuel appeared to have intimidated Samuel into submission, and it was not by any threats of legal action. Instead, he simply replied on his fearsome determination and indomitable aura. Sheldon was in awe. No wonder they say you can't judge a book by its cover. Who knew someone who looks as genteel as Emmanuel would turn out to be such a fierce character? Samuel's furious shout pierced the silence of the room. "You think you can just order me to ask my men to leave? What about my reputation? What will everyone think of me then?"